Okay, again, good morning, class. So, this is again a continuation of our discussion. I think this will be the last part of the discussion of our atoms, molecules, and ions. And for this part, we will be focusing on molecules and ions. So, ayun, kalimutan ko lang yun. Yes. But anyway, let's first discuss what is a molecule and what is an ion. So, a molecule is actually an aggregate of two or more atoms in a definite arrangement held together by chemical forces. So, this is just not just some atoms na katabi. Ganyan. They are bonded. So, they are bonded by chemical means or in it can be a single bond, double bond, whatsoever, a triple bond in some cases. So here are some examples of molecules. We have molecules that have the same elements. Here we have hydrogen gas. Also, it can be an aggregate or a combination of uh, different atoms. Like for example, we have here water, which is an aggregate of or combination of two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom. Also, we have here ammonia. The ammonia, we have here a combination of one nitrogen atom and three hydrogen atoms. Also, we have here methane. Methane is a combination of one carbon atom and four hydrogen atom. As you can see here, there um, there's a line or what you call here a bond in each molecule wherein that serves as a anchor point or let's say a point where the atoms are connected to each other. Realistically, syempre, hindi ganyan yung itsura nila. Ano. These are just models wherein kung paano natin i-represent yung mga yan. Meron pang there is some sort of complexity regarding the appearance or the real appearance of those chemical forces na tinatawag natin. Okay. So by molecule, there are actually different types of molecule. First, we have here a diatomic molecules, which contains only two atoms. So an example here of diatomic molecule is our hydrogen. Okay? So meron bang monoatomic molecule? Siyempre wala po ano. So when we talk about molecule, at least meron tayong dalawang atom. So here are some examples of diatomic molecules. It can be a molecule of the same atoms like hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, bromine. It can also be an aggregate or combination of two other atoms like here we have here hydrogen chloride. Uh, I think the hydrogen chloride example here is the hydrogen chloride that is the solid state, I think. Okay, and also we have here carbon monoxide, which is a combination of one carbon and one oxygen. If we have diatomic elements, also we have some polyatomic molecule. So these polyatomic molecules contains more than two atoms. Some examples are stated here. Top, we have here water, ammonia, and methane. And some other examples are ozone. Yun lang yung nadagdag niya. Okay. So that is a molecule. So how about ions? So when we talk about ions, this is an ion or a group of it is an ion is an atom or a group of atoms that has a net positive or negative charge. So when we talk about ions, it can be a molecule, it can be an atom. So when we talk about the atoms part of the ion, These are some atoms who lose or gains electrons kaya sila nagkakaroon ng positive or negative charge. Para naman dun sa group of atoms, kung mag-iisip natin, para lang, parang molecule siya. Molecule na nabawasan ng electron or dadagdagan ng molecule ng electron. So, paano yun nangyayari? Paano siya nagiging positive charge? Paano nagiging negative charge? Kung isipin natin, halimbawa, ang isang neutral na bagay, zero ang charge. Pag nagdagdag ka ng electron, which is the negative charge, okay, pag nagdagdag ka ng negativity, magiging negative siya syempre. Okay? At pag ano naman neutral, nagbawas ka ng electron, nagbawas ka ng negative, magiging positive siya. So parang buhay lang ano. Pag inabsorb mo ang negativity sa surroundings mo, magiging negative ka. Pag nirelease mo ang negativity, magiging positive ka. So yun lang yung ibig sabihin nun. So we have two types of ions. We have here the cation. This is the neutral atom that loses one or more electrons. Kaya siya nagiging positively charged. Okay? So, and an example here is sodium. Okay? On neutral state, sodium metal have 11 protons and 11 electrons. If mabawasan siya ng electron, siya ay magiging Na+. So, makikita natin dito, nabawasan ng electron, naging positive. Kaya siya naging positive. So, another classification of ion is anion. So, an anion is an ion with a negative charge. So, if a neutral atom gains one or more electrons, it becomes an anion. So, say we have here an example. We have here chlorine. On neutral state, at neutral state, chlorine has 17 protons and 17 electrons. So, if we are to add more electron, it will become Cl minus or a chloride ion. So we have here 17 protons and 18 electrons. So dito tayo, class, medyo magkakaroon ng ng kaguluhan or confusion when it comes to the number of electrons. Sabi ko kanina dun sa discussion natin sa ano pa lang, dun sa mass number at saka sa atomic number. Kung isipin natin, yung atomic number, stated siya na gano'n, at reference siya sa proton kasi yung proton hindi siya nagbabago ng number for a certain atom. But when we talk about electrons, dito na tayo magkakaroon ng uh, tawag dito, ng changes. So, yun lang, medyo baliktad lang yung nangyayari for the number of electrons. So, if an atom is positively charged, there are lesser number of electrons for that scenario. And for the case na naging negative naman siya, mag-a-add naman tayo ng electron. So, pakita natin kung ano yung sinasabi kong pwedeng ikalito nyo. So, ito yung kabaliktaran for the number of electrons. Hindi po pala ito yung sample. Okay, so we have here the different types of ion. So we have here the monoatomic ion. It only contains one atom. Yung examples natin kanina, yung sodium, yung chlorine. We have here calcium, oxygen. We have here aluminum, and also we have here our nitrogen. Also, there can be also what we call a polyatomic ion. Yung ito yung sinasabi ko kanina na mukhang molecule pero hindi. Yan, dyan yung ating OH, cyanide, yung ating ammonium, at saka yung ating uh, nitrate. So, balik ko muna. Baka masyado kayo nabilisan. Sabagay, pwede nyo naman i-post yung video just in case. Okay? So, here are some ions that are shown on periodic table of elements. So, ito ay periodic table of ions na, if you may say. So, we have here, pakita ko lang ng konti yung trend kung ano yung nangyayari. Ano. Notice all the ions here at the green side. Okay? Dito sa green side, actually makikita nyo lahat sila ay positive ions. So, anong meron dyan sa positive ions na yan? So, pag sinabi natin positive yung ions, ibig sabihin, nag-lose siya ng electron. Actually, isang pattern dyan, actually class, lahat ng nandyan sa green na yan, actually ay mga, most of it are what you call metals. Right? So, when we talk about metals and when we talk about metal ions, usually these metal ions give off or release electrons to gain a positive charge. Okay? So, kung mapapansin nyo rin sa right side, dun sa blue side naman, these are actually, kung mapapansin nyo, halos lahat sila ay negative. Okay? These are actually non-metals. Okay? So, for these non-metals, they have the tendency to gain, yeah, to gain electrons, therefore gaining a negative charge. So, paano yung nandito sa may part ng, ano, ng, sa gray? Those are actually, ayun, somewhere in between. Kung daw nagkakamali, ito yung mga tinatawag nating metalloids. They sometimes behave as metals and sometimes behave as non-metals. So, yung ibang metalloids, they have tendency to gain electrons and some are have the tendency to lose electrons. So that depends. For example, we have here tellurium. Tellurium has a charge of -2, meaning they have higher tendency to gain electrons. So, some basic points then when it comes to nonmetals. So, to non-metals and metals regarding their ions. If we are to look for the A series, we have here the 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A, 6A, 7A. Kung mapapansin nyo actually class, sila may pattern yung pagka-lose or pagka-gain ng electron. Sinasabi nga natin dito kanina, metals have the tendency to lose electron. But how much? How much electron? So kung mapapansin nyo rito, sa first part, sa series, lahat sila ay 1. Ito ay when we talk about electron to ha, nabawasan tayo ng 1. Okay? Dito ay nabawasan tayo ng 2. For this period sa taas, ito ay nadagdagan ng 4. Electrons yung sinasabi ko dito, klase, baka nalilito kayo. Dito ay nadagdagan ng 3. Dito ay nadagdagan ng 2. Dito ay nadagdagan ng 1. So, yan yung trend when it comes to the A series or the A periods. So, yun yung pwede nating tingnan. Medyo mag-iiba nga lang yan when it comes to the metals, the other metals na nandito na sa may gitna, yung sa B series. Yan yung uh, iba-iba na yung pattern. Some of them ay pwedeng magkaroon ng charge na 2 plus, by 3 plus, 2 plus, 3 plus. Kung makikita nyo, 2 plus, 3 plus yung nangyayari. Tapos biglang sa copper, ano na lang, plus. Then, pwede siyang maging 2 plus. For the zinc, 2 plus. For aluminum, 3 plus ulit. So, walang common na trend when it comes to those metals. Pero, for lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium, magnesium, calcium, strontium, and barium, lahat sila ay nagpa-follow ng trend. Okay? So, masyadong naging mahaba yung explanation ko rito, sorry. So, let's move on to the examples. So, this is more on looking into the number of protons and electrons in an ion. At ion pala to kasi positive. And anyway, we have here aluminum 3 plus. So if we are to, the problem here is we need to look into the number of protons and the number of electrons in aluminum 3 plus. So for the protons, dali lang to. We just need to get the atomic number. So we have there 13. That is unchanging. Hindi nagbabago ang number ng protons, mapaano mang charge ng ating ion. So, how about the electrons? So, sabi natin kanina, pag positive ang ating ion, nag-lose siya ng electron. Okay. So, we have here 3 plus, meaning this ion lose 3 electrons, meaning we have here 13 lose 3 minus 3. So, that we have here 10. So, for aluminum 3 plus, so we have here 13 protons and 10 electrons. For example, we have here an ion. So, we have here selenium 2 minus, 34 ang kanyang atomic number, meaning to say the number of protons is 34. So, we have here negative 2. Ibig sabihin, nag-gain tayo ng electron, nadagdagan ng electron. Ibig sabihin, magkakaroon tayo dyan ng 34 plus 2. Okay, so we have here 36. So, we have here 34 protons and 36 electrons. Okay, hopefully that's clear. Next. So, here are just some, padaanan lang natin some formulas and models uh, regarding ions and molecules. So, we have here for the molecules, we have here some molecular formula. By molecular formula, we just need to write the atoms and how many atoms are there in the molecular formula, in the molecule. So, here are some other formula regarding that. We have here the structural formula. Structural formula shows how the atoms are bonded to each other. As we can see here, for the hydrogen are just simply uh, bonded to each other. For water, we can see here that each hydrogen is bonded to the oxygen. And for ammonia, ganun din, each hydrogen is bonded to the nitrogen. And for the methane, each of the 4 hydrogen are bonded to the carbon. So we have here the ball and stick model. Ito yung pinakita natin kanina. And we have here the space filling model. So by space filling model, eh, it represents kung ano yung space na ino-occupy ng movement ng electrons ng bawat atoms para maipakita kung ano yung region kung saan sila nagkaroon ng tinatawag nating bonding. So, yan yung para sa hydrogen, sa water, sa ammonia, at sa methane. Okay? And for the molecular formula actually just show the exact number of atoms of each element in the smallest unit of a substance. So, meron itong kapartner, hindi natawag na empirical formula. Ito ay lowest, simplest form lang. Simplest whole number ratio of the atoms in the substance. So kumbaga, kung meron kang C6H12, pag gumawa ka ng empirical formula, yun ay magiging ano lang, CH2. Pakita lang natin dito. Halimbawa, dito sa molecular formula ng water, the empirical formula will be same. But if you have C6H12O6, this is a sugar actually. If I'm not mistaken, this is glucose. So, pag ginawa natin siya ng empirical formula, baling gagawin lang natin, isi-simplify lang natin yung number of yung mga yan. So, basically, anong common sa kanila? 6 sa lahat ng mga yan. Divide lang natin ng 6 to. That will be 1, 2, 1. Okay? So, kaya tayo magkakaroon ng CH2O. Okay? Simplification lang yung ating empirical formula. And if we have O3 or ozone, for the molecular formula, its empirical formula will be O. Kaya, if we have diammonium nga ba ang tawag dito? So, the common value or the common is 2, GCF. So we just need to divide both of the subscript by 2. So we have there 1 and 2. We have there NH2. Okay, so that is molecular formula and empirical formula. Okay, next natin is ionic compounds. So for ionic compounds, these are compounds that are consist of combination of cations and anions. So the formula is usually the same as the empirical formula. So usually kasi na ang ionic compounds dahil dun sa nature nila ng positive and negative, they just form lattices wherein there is a one-to-one correspondence between the cation and the anions. So the sum of the charges of the cations and anions should be equal to zero. So ito yung sinasabi kong lattices. So when we talk about ionic compounds, let's say for here we have here the table salt. This is the reason why table salt appear as cubes or rectangular prisms because they form lattices. There is some sort of connection between the positively charged sodium and the negatively charged chlorine, therefore forming salt, or the most common or the most abused example of ionic compound, which is NaCl. So, if we are to look at this, this is just another representation of all we have discussed earlier. Uh, so we have here in 1A and 2A are the most reactive metals, and actually meron din tayo sa 3A, which is aluminum. And for the 5A to 6 to 7A, we have here the most reactive nonmetals to form ionic compounds. So by most reactive and most reactive metals and most reactive nonmetals, these ions or the ions of these atoms or elements has the highest tendency to become ionic compounds. Meaning to say, all other may prefer molecules or yung tinatawag nating chemical bonding mismo rather than ionic bonding. So by ionic bonding, this is the relationship of the positive and the negatively charged ions kaya na tayo nagkakaroon ng ionic compound. Okay, so we have here some formula of the ionic compounds. Wala tayo ditong tinatawag na empirical formula. Kung meron man, yung empirical formula ng isang ionic compound is similar sa kanyang ionic formula. So, for this, if we are to check for the charges of these ions, pwede natin gawin, ayan, siya ay, nilagay na pala, aluminum 3 plus, and we have here O2 minus. Kung titingnan natin, kailangan lang naman natin i-check ay yung charges nila. So, paano natin gagawin yon? So, makikita nyo dito, dalawa yung, yung ating aluminum. So, mangyayari dyan, magkakaroon tayo ng 2 times positive 3, which is positive 6. And for the oxygen, we have here, or the oxide, we have here 3 with na negative 2. Multiply lang natin yan sa 3, so kakaroon tayo negative 6. Positive 6 plus negative 6 is just 0. So, yun yung dapat nating tandaan when we are to consider an ionic compound. It must have a charge which is neutral or 0. So, we have here calcium 2 plus, and we have here bromine minus. Yan lang ulit, similar process. Isang calcium, multiply natin sa 2 plus. Count time positive 2. And dalawang bromine, multiply na sa negative 1, which is negative 2. Same for the sodium carbonate. We have sodium, which is plus or positive 1. And we have carbonate, which is negative 2. So since we have 2 sodium, we have there 2 times baliktad na plus. This should be 2 times positive 1. Parehas naman yung sagot pero to avoid confusion. And we have here 1 times negative 2, which is negative 2, which is 2 plus negative 2 is 0. Okay, so for the naming of ionic compounds, we will be discussing this later on in the course, maybe on Wednesday. Okay, so we will just continue on this discussion wherein we will be discussing how we go about uh, this this naming. Okay, and also for the molecular compounds, same. We will be talking about that later on, which is should be a separate topic regarding compounds. Okay, so that will be all for today. If you have any question on this part 3 and the last part of the discussions of ions and molecules and ions, just message me on our group chat if you have time, or if you have Discord, you can DM me there also. Okay, thank you and have a nice day. Bye.